It's clear. Cliff Albright, Executive Director of Black Voters Matter, joins us right now. Cliff, I don't understand why I mean, states are an agent of the federal government. Go to my iPad, Anthony. There's a thing, Cliff, that this idiot's never read the Constitution. The 10th Amendment states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The reality, Cliff, is we don't have federal elections. Elections are actually governed by states, state election boards, state law. Now, there are things that Congress can do, because when you're talking about presidential races, U.S. Senate races, congressional races, but even still, that's working in concert with the states. But you notice, he said nothing about Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, Nebraska, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota. Oh, he made no mention of any red, white states.
Yeah, and to be clear, what's going on, Roland? And to be clear, you know, for folks that are watching, you may see some other clips, some interviews that have been done from some of these other Republicans where they're trying to clean up what he said. You got them out there trying to say he's talking about the SAVE Act, right? Which is bad enough, which is about, you know, trying to have voter ID in order to keep something from happening, which literally never happens, which is non-citizens voting. But that's bad enough. But they're trying to cover up what he said to say, oh no, he was talking about this other thing. And then he came back and doubled down. It was basically like I said what I said. And what he said is exactly what you played, which is that he thinks that they ought to be able to go in and take over these elections in these states. And to be more clear, really, he's just talking about certain cities in these states, as you correctly pointed out, when they tried to overturn the 2020 election. He was really complaining about Atlanta and Detroit and Philadelphia, right? All these black cities. And so this is consistent with what he's been saying. And what he does is that he runs these things up the flagpole. He'll say these things. He'll repeat them every now and then. He'll test out the reactions. And next thing you know, you got ICE agents outside polling places. He was very clear what he's talking about. So don't let anybody gaslight you and act like he's just talking about, you know, some vague concepts of election security. He is talking about federal officials going in, running these elections. And more specifically, what he really cares about is what? I think it was the last sentence of what he said, which is the count. He said, we need to be able to come in and do the counts. Now, here's a man who has cheated on everything in his entire life, including the 2020 election, and he wants to be able to control the counts taking place in these cities. Right. And we got to connect the dots, as I know that you have already, with the raid that took place, the stealing of the ballots in Fulton County just the other day.
Well, here is House Speaker Republican Mike Johnson speaking on the very issue. And again, listen to the BS.
Follow up on elections. The president says that he wants Republicans to nationalize elections. Do you agree with him? And do you have confidence in how elections are conducted right now, heading into the midterm?
We have thoughtful debate about our election system every election cycle and sometimes in between. We know it's in our system. The states have been in charge of administering their elections. What you're hearing from the president is his frustration about the lack of some of the blue states, frankly, of enforcing these things and making sure that they are free and fair elections. We need constant improvement on that front. I don't know what the ultimate solution is going to be. I'm not going to get ahead of the negotiations here, but I think that is something that's going to be a continuing theme here. It's something that we'll continue to push, and we hope the governors will insist upon that same thing as well. In some of the states, like in California, for example, I mean, they hold the elections open for weeks after Election Day. That's just one thing that bothers so many people. We had 3 House Republican candidates who were ahead on Election Day in the last election cycle. And every time a new tranche of ballots came in, they just magically whittled away until their leads were lost. In no series of ballots that were counted after Election Day were our candidates ahead on any of those counts. It looks on its face to be fraudulent. Can I prove that? No, because it happened so far upstream. But we need more confidence in the American people in the election system, and it's essential. And everybody, no matter what party you're in, should agree with that. The mass mailing of paper ballots or mail-in ballots and all the other irregularities that have haunted us over the last couple of cycles, we need to tighten that up. Now, the red states have done a lot of good work in that front, but it's the blue states that I'm frankly concerned about. So we'll see how the law is modified and what's changed, but I hope we can get consensus to get that done. Yeah.
Oh, so he's only concerned about the blue states, and when he complains about this, Cliff, first of all, he's a liar. Then he goes, well, I can't prove it. Yeah, you can't prove it because it doesn't exist. Here's what we know. Depending upon your state, you have some states that say, okay, your ballot, if you mail it in, must be postmarked by election day. Some allow a certain period of days for overseas balloting that actually takes place. What you also have that people somehow seem not to understand is that when you have some places where they don't count early votes until after 7 p.m. on that particular night. So different jurisdictions have different rules. And the Republicans don't want to deal with that. And it's like, oh, my God, it's like California is weeks after the fact. Yes, because, again, if you allow folks for mail-in, and see, here's the real deal. They hate the fact that, and this is what we know, they are on record. If more people in America vote, they stand a higher chance of losing. They want fewer people voting, Cliff.
Clearly, and I wish I had $1 every time one of them was caught on camera or some recording somewhere admitting as much, hoping that the weather is bad, hoping that, the voter ID does what it was designed to do in order to keep Democrats writ large, but more specifically Black and brown voters from being able to vote. Like, they've been very clear about what it is that they're trying to do. And in fact, if you listen to what in that clip, what Mike Johnson said at the very beginning, where he's talking about the states having jurisdiction over these elections, and he says the states have been running these elections. He doesn't say the states are. It doesn't say the states are supposed to. He doesn't say that the states are going to continue, right? He says the states have. I mean, he has not taken off the table doing exactly what it is that Trump wants him to do, right? Which is to try to federalize, to nationalize, or at least to excuse and turn a blind eye when Trump tries to do whatever he's going to try to do. And so this is a very serious situation. But we've, as we always say, we've got the power to do something, right? As voters, as organizations, as journalists like you. But we also need folks to be having folks who have elected power in some of these states, especially the blue states that they're targeting, to be very mindful, right? To not wait for November, whatever, and then be surprised if there's some attempt to try to federalize these and nationalize these elections. We need them to be taking some steps right now to prepare for that. Whether it's steps like, what some of the states are doing now. Tish James just said something in regards to ICE and the way that they're going to be monitoring ICE. But we've got to make sure that states are prepared to push back if there is any attempt to nationalize these elections. And we have to also keep in mind that it's not just blue states, because as I mentioned before, and as you mentioned, Atlanta is not a blue state,
No,
right? At least not yet. But they are very, Georgia, I should have said, is not a blue state yet, but Atlanta is a blue dot within this state that they very much want to try to take over. And that's what that raid was about the other day. It's part of a process by which they're trying to take over the Fulton County elections.
Well, and the other thing is this here, and this is what is so laughable. There were many Republicans and Democrats on the ballot in all of these states. Mm-hmm. The only candidate, the only person who is whining is the person who lost in 2020. So what Donald Trump is saying, that everybody else is on the ballot, every gubernatorial candidate, every U.S. Senate, every U.S. House, oh my God, all of them, all of their elections were fine except mine, but it was the same one as everybody else.
And we have to remind people, again, Mike Johnson says, can I prove it? No, but like it's not something that's been investigated. The last election was one of the most recounted, audited. I'm sorry, not the last election, 24. That needed to be. We needed more audits in 24, but that's another story. But the 2020 election was one of the most recounted audited elections ever. Right, even here in Georgia, 3 separate accounts, machine and by hand, and yet they never. And keeping in mind that all this stuff that he's saying, oh, take a look at Georgia, take a look at Pennsylvania. Guess what? They've been looked at. The courts looked at them. He had like 60 cases where courts were looking at them, and every single one where they asked for some evidence of what he was talking about, there was no evidence, right? Rudy Giuliani facing all kinds of lawsuits because he was out there running his mouth, claiming that some stuff happened that absolutely did not happen, that they had absolutely no evidence for. So all of this has been looked at. And for Mike Johnson to act like this is just something that there's no history of, no documentation of, that hasn't been, litigated, is just, if Mike Johnson's mouth is moving, he's lying, right? And so at the end of the day, again, we've got to take these threats, these comments, we've got to take them very seriously. We've got to put aside this notion of American exceptionalism, because even as we're talking about this right now, there are some folks out there listening saying, oh, but that could never happen, right? Because this is America. Like, surely there aren't elections that are just nationalized. Like, surely you couldn't have federal troops or ICE agents at polling places, right? There's still, even after everything that we've seen, there's still some of us that want to believe that there are certain things that could not happen in this country, in spite of everything that we've seen, and not just everything that we've seen recently, but in spite of our history in this country. Ever since we've been here, and particularly in the ways that Reconstruction was ended, you had Black elected officials that were literally dragged out of chambers, who had been elected to these chambers, right? And so we need not confuse ourselves and think that something like this, something like what he's proposing, couldn't happen here.
Last point for folks who don't understand: if you don't vote, then you allow these folks to win and for them to be in control.
Yes, that's the bottom line. At the end of the day, in spite of what they're saying, in spite of the seriousness of it, we don't want folks to be like scared into being paralyzed, right? It's about being aware and knowing what's going on, but still doing everything that we can to take action. And that means not just us voting, but it also means all the other things that we've got to be doing to stay vigilant, to continue to organize, whether it's in the streets or any of the other ways that we're organizing. But we've got to remember that we've got to use the vote, but we also got to use all the other tools in the toolboxes. It doesn't mean that voting is not absolutely critical. It is critical. It is absolutely critical. But we also got to be aware that when we're facing the kinds of things like what he's talking about and the kinds of things that we're seeing, we got to be fully prepared to vote and prepared to do all the other work that we've got to do.
All right.
If we do that, we win.
Indeed. Cliff Albright, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bringing my